Thanks, Kim. All right, so far so good, and I haven't pushed the third button yet, accidentally. Now that Kim has given us an operating framework for change, how do we translate that into practical things that we could take back to our teams and our companies and our day-to-day work? So Atlassian has been working really hard on our own operating model, our own operating framework for how we drive change and improvement inside of the company. We call it the Atlassian Team Playbook. The Atlassian Playbook is a broad collection of how-to guides and little bits of instruction and recipes to help teams better navigate the change that they're trying to navigate together. There are agile practices like retros and the way that we do retros, as well as creative practices like mind mapping. Whatever the type of change a team at Atlassian is trying to work through, ideally we will have a play that we can provide to them to guide them more easily through the change. What I love most about the playbook is that it is written by teams for teams. And it is contributed by teams that have figured out how to do one thing well, and they want to transpose or transfer that to teams that are maybe earlier in the journey or earlier navigating that change. So when one team goes through some change, they experiment, they figure out how to work through the outcome. And if it works, if it's a practice or a method or a set of instructions that are repeatable, they document it. And they want to make sure that it's something they can share and that it can spread from their team to other teams in the organization. So the person that you're about to hear from is the agent of change inside of Atlassian who is responsible for making sure those things are documented and making sure that they're shareable. She is the builder of the recipe book inside of Atlassian that helps all of our teams become better cooks. And so without further ado, please give a warm welcome to the head of practices at Atlassian, Mary Raleigh.
Hi, everyone. I have a confession to make. I hate change. I do. I'm just someone who finds solace in that framework that Kim just walked us through because I love routine. I eat the same thing for breakfast every day. I've been wearing the same socks for 20 years. I'm wearing them now. Not the same pair. And I bounce a tennis ball exactly 4 times before every single serve in a tennis match. These are all practices. And Atlassian's culture is fast and furious. So I need these type of things for my personal life. But in team dynamic, we need practices that help us manage the change. As Jay walked us through, this is our great teamwork equation. As change agents in our organization, we don't always have the ability to change the skill set of our teams or hire new people, and a lot of us aren't the product purchasing makers. What we can all change is the practices on our teams. So raise your hand if your company has a VP of change. I didn't think so. No one does, right? Because change is all of our jobs. And the way to manage change is through practices. Practices are the easiest way to make change from wherever you sit in the organization. Trying new practices requires no formal authority and no training. The right practices are going to give your team the combination of autonomy, competence, and relatedness that's necessary to create successful change. As Kim just walked us through, this is the self-determination theory. The question is, we have all this great information, how do we actually put it into action? How do we pick the right practices for the changes our teams are facing? I want all of you to leave open with the confidence to try at least one new practice with your teams on Wednesday. So to do that, I'm going to ask all you guys to put down whatever you have on your laps, stand on your chairs, beat your chest, and chant, "I am a change agent." No? Okay. Just kidding. To pick the right practices for your teams, you actually only need 2 things. First, you have to see it to believe it. So I'll walk you through 3 stories of change agents at Atlassian and customer companies and how they went through picking out the right practices for their teams. Second, you need a coach. And while I would love to spend my fall traipsing through Europe, coming to all your companies to coach you all, that would interrupt my breakfast routine. So instead, I'll send you home with step-by-step instructions to enable you to try more than 40 of our tried and tested practices with your teams at home. Now you'll notice I have never, and I will never say the phrase best practice. I don't believe there is such a thing. There's no one practice that fits every team and every situation. Just like I don't believe there's one soulmate for every person, which I'm allowed to say because I'm still single. Just like finding the right life partner, picking the right practice is about a combination of timing and chemistry. So each story I'm about to tell you will be about the practices that were right for 3 very different scenarios. First, a massive project here at Atlassian. Second, a distributed team at SOPHOS. And last, we'll go through a team that was stuck in old ways of working at the largest grocery chain in the UK. So whether you've been to every single summit, you're a Jira admin or a first-time Confluence user, maybe you're a DevOps leader looking for a full stack, I have a feeling at least one of the pains that these customers and Atlassians were going through will be relatable to you. So if you have that feeling of like uncomfortable familiarity sometime when I'm talking, get your phone out. Because at the end of every story, there'll be a slide that has the link to the exact practices the teams in these stories use. You won't want to miss it. Okay, I'm going to start by airing Atlassian's dirty laundry, giving you a peek into one of our biggest projects ever. A project so big, major missteps would have affected everyone in this room. We'll go back to 2016. Atlassian made a crazy decision. We decided to re-architect Confluence and Jira to be true multi-tenant, stateless cloud applications. It was going to take a team of over 271 engineers, and if it took us too long to finish, we'd risk losing customers like you all because you'd be wondering where all the features were. This was crazy because we were drastically changing our cloud infrastructure, going from a single tenant to a multi-tenanted system, which meant change galore. Change to the way we code, changes in how our development teams work with one another, and really changes to the day-to-day responsibilities of pretty much every single Atlassian developer. And to top it all off, there was very little room for error as we were adjusting to these changes. If you guys are operating a multi-tenant infrastructure yourself, you know that every single developer is now capable of creating a bug that puts us on the front of Hacker News, and not for the reasons you want to be there. The stakes were high, to say the least. And as Kim taught us, for all the developers, this change elicited feelings of loss of narrative, loss of competence, loss of familiarity, loss of pride, and definitely loss of time, all of which needed to be addressed as part of the change process. Thankfully, we had an empathetic change champion at the helm. These are the many faces and hairdos of Jonathan Creenon, aka JC. He was the lead dev manager for this massive project, and he felt the pressure for it to succeed more than anyone. This was the first project he was working on with our newly hired CTO. And actually, he was the leader, but none of the people on the team actually reported to him. And to be honest with you, he had very little experience with cloud infrastructure. But what he could do was pick the right practices for this project, some of which the champions initially hated. Okay, I'm going to just have you call out how many people have been in the biggest stand-up you've ever been part of. Just yell it out. Somebody's got to yell. No? 15? 30? All right. JC made his team do a weekly stand-up with 40 people. 40. You heard me right, not 14. See, JC realized early on what Kim has to spend months coaching her C-suite clients. That you have to communicate until you are blue in the face. JC knew this was the right practice for his massive project because he needed to get everybody to march to the beat of the same drum without changing reporting lines. So after only 2 massive stand-ups, the cynics were actually kind of excited about them because as part of them, they realized it's the most important hour of their week. One thing they realized in these stand-ups was one of the biggest risks to this project's success, which was integrations. Normally, in one of our smaller and probably less important projects, and you guys might do this too, you wait till the end to do all the integrations. But we couldn't do that in this situation. So, what do you do when you need to teach developers who are used to waiting till the end to make incremental progress to integrate? You have to find a practice that will act as a forcing function to make incremental progress. So the team, taking a page from Kim's book, made it social. Once the integration work started, the team created a ritual of weekly Friday afternoon demos with the entire 271-person team. Sounds more miserable than a 40-person stand-up, doesn't it? Not when you make it social. I'd be pretty happy to be in this room on a Friday afternoon with my team. In fact, I plan on being that girl with the wine glass in about 10 minutes. The massive project would have felt like a long slog if the team members like JC hadn't optimized practices not just for info sharing, but also for smiles on these people's faces, which gave the team both the competence and relatedness in one fell swoop. What they needed now? Autonomy. So moving from a single tenant to a multi-tenant cloud infrastructure meant there were more than 50 streams of work, all making decisions on a daily basis. The team needed two practices to make sure we were safely managing our customers' data while enabling autonomy among teams. First, the teams needed a practice that explicitly called out when emphasizing speed was trading off for quality. The trade-off sliders practice helped us uncover specific situations where velocity was important, like preparing for the weekly integration demos, and other situations where we needed to prioritize quality. But for this project, we actually needed even more structure around those velocity and quality trade-offs because of the potential of multi-tenant data leakage. Multi-tenant data leakage means that a developer accidentally exposes any single customer's data. To put it lightly, it would have been a company-ending event for Atlassian. So knowing we needed a bit more structure, JC and team used the rules of engagement practice, which gave them a set of guidelines that would help every developer and every stream of work have the autonomy to identify markers in their work that required them to slow down to protect customer data. Okay, now for the results. This all started in 2016. We'd given ourselves a very aggressive deadline of 1 year to migrate our first customer. Do you think we did it? Hell yeah, we did. As a result of JC and team choosing the right practices for this massive project, as of the 21st of December 2017, not just one, but 100% of Jira and Confluence Cloud instances were migrated to our new multi-tenant infrastructure with no significant incidents. If you're a cloud customer with a large instance, this means that you would have meaningfully improved performance with significantly less dropouts. And the most important thing to me, honestly, as the head of practices, is that all the developers who worked on this project, their lives are better. We have significantly less tech debt, and I like to think they learned a thing or two about how to pick the right practices for their future projects. Let's summarize. Now's the time to get out your phone if any of these things related to you. So the right practices for this massive project were a 40-person weekly stand-up, an all-hands-on-deck weekly demo trust, trade-off sliders to manage risk, and rules of engagement to make real-time decisions about when to go fast and slow. There's a step-by-step guide to use these exact practices, all available on AtlassianTeamPlaybook.com. In fact, other customer teams are already using them to manage their own changes, big and small. So that cloud infrastructure story I told you was seriously massive, and hopefully it's a once in every 10 years project. But there's other examples of change that are happening more often, like distributed teamwork. Take SOPHOS, a mid-market cybersecurity firm based in the UK. These days, when cybersecurity is your business, there is no room for miscommunications among distributed teams. So to meet their increasing demands in today's cyber dangerous world, SOPHOS decided to double their team size by adding new team members at an office in the Philippines. So as they did this, they didn't think there'd be a big issue because SOPHOS already has 51 offices across the globe. So from a tooling and cultural perspective, they're set up for distributed work. But after the first weeks of excitement wore off, they realized communications between the UK and Manila teams were definitely broken. Honestly, they had no idea how to pick the right practice because they didn't even know what the problem was. So rather than just pick a practice out of the blue, they decided to start with an open conversation about what was going well and what wasn't. The team used the health monitor practice. They started with a leadership team health monitor because they realized that they needed to do an internal look on themselves before they expanded this out to the greater team. Through the health monitor practice, they identified that roles and responsibilities was not working well for them. And so in order to better enable the team in Manila, they needed to more clearly have reporting lines. So they were in control of that, and they were able to just quickly make a change. So Ritesh was going to manage integrations, Corinne would manage back office, and Aaron would manage DevOps. This was great. Solved about 50% of their communications challenges. But in their industry, there's no room for even 5% miscommunications. So Ritesh made the journey down to Manila, and he did the health monitor practice there with the teams in the Philippines. And what they uncovered really surprised them. So in previous attempts to diagnose what was going on, the Manila team had shared a pretty rosy view of what was happening, thinking the UK team knew things weren't going smoothly, but the team in the Manila wouldn't say anything. The health monitor practice offered a structured way to share feedback and give the Manila team members the permission that they needed to share what was actually happening. See, the health monitor practice consists of just democratic thumb voting that everyone does at the same time, and a very easy to grok definition of healthy teams, making it the right practice for SOPHOS delivery and operations team because it gave them the ability to have a productive, open dialogue about what wasn't working. So now that Ritesh is back in the UK and there are still the teams in Manila, they've started to try to experiment with remote health monitors using our guided experience online. So when SOPHOS added their new teams in the Philippines, they expected everything to go hunky-dory because they had, the right tools and the right culture for distributed teamwork. The problem was their practices were not ready for distributed teamwork. Standing up a new team in an offshore location meant they had to have specific practices for managing that change and adjusting to the new norms of having team members abroad. What worked for SOPHOS was a leadership team health monitor for Aaron, Corinne, and Ritesh, project team health monitors for the team in Manila, and as Aaron's DevOps group expands, he'll start using the service team health monitor. If any of these sound like challenges that your teams are facing, feel free to check out the step-by-step instructions and run your own health monitor at atlassianteamplaybook.com. So for SOPHOS, they had the luxury of starting fresh. They had a new team they were onboarding, and they could create practices where there were none. For most of us, our biggest barrier to change is actually unlearning. It's a much steeper hill to climb when you have existing teams with established ways of working that they're kind of stuck in. Ryan and his team at the largest grocery chain in the UK were stuck in old ways of working. They had a huge data center instance with over 1 million issues. And Ryan, he's the guy responsible for it all. I met Ryan right about the time that his company had mandated that all projects from IT to marketing would be managed in Jira. This meant a huge shift in ways of working for the over 450,000 employees who used to manage projects in their own bespoke ways. It's a big task to try to convince stakeholders to abandon existing ways of working. You see, Ryan's the Jira guy, so his reputation relies on teams using Jira. And not just that, but them being more effective because they use Jira. And he knew he couldn't drive change just with because management said so. I don't even think he could have used that cute puppy to lure people into new ways of working. So to help teams work more effectively with Jira, he'd have to take on the daunting task of actually understanding the customers and their varying needs across widely different functions. So he started a listening tour of his customers. He used his own version of Atlassian's customer interview practice to investigate how teams across the company were managing their projects today, with and without Jira. He coupled these face-to-face chats with some log data from Jira to get a full picture of the pains that customers were currently experiencing. Through listening to his customers and with the product data, Ryan was able to identify what he was sure was going to be the silver bullet to help teams abandon their old ways of working. He needed to change his team's role from a team responding to requests for customization to a team evangelizing solutions for best-in-class project management. So his team took what they learned from the customer interviews and created a stakeholder communications plan aimed at helping teams improve their project management and use Jira more effectively. He knew from their customer interviews that the most common source of teams' frustration stemmed from using workflows that were ill-fitted to their use cases. Take, for example, a marketing team who was using Jira because it was mandated, but the steps in their workflow they were using were in testing and ready for development. But they were managing a workflow for press releases. So I have a feeling those statuses are not relevant to press releases and definitely painful for a team who'd really rather be using Jira to go back and forth. So as part of his stakeholder communications plan, Ryan and his team prioritized a handful of customer segments, and for each segment crafted an elevator pitch to consistently and compellingly convince customers to try new project management practices powered by Jira. An elevator pitch is a quick description of the customer segment, a description of the pain that they're going through, and then a very compelling articulation of why Ryan's proposed solution is the best solution. The reason it was the right practice for Ryan and team was because it was the most efficient way of addressing the loss teams would feel as they were mourning their old ways of working in order to adapt to the new ways of working. I'm guessing right about now, you all are feeling about just how daunting this was for Ryan to convince over 450,000 people to change their ways of working. He had a tall order to turn his team into that project management center of excellence he envisioned. But they did it. Ryan's story is really one of my favorites, not only because the teams that he helped became more effective in their project management, which for some meant simplifying and for others meant more integrations. It's one of my favorite stories because Ryan wasn't doing this to be a hero. But as a result of this, Ryan ended up landing his dream job. The practices and product knowledge that Ryan learned through these experiments have propelled him to an exciting new role. As a product manager, building some of Jira's most exciting add-ons at the Adaptivist team. So changes come in all types and sizes, and sometimes at the times we least expect it, or in my case, want it. In each of the stories we just heard, there were more cynics that needed convincing than champions for change. But that's the thing about being a champion. There doesn't need to be more of you for you to be successful. You just need the right practices. For JC, Ritesh, Corinne, and Aaron, and Ryan, practices made the difference in their team's success or failure. JC's massive project, he needed a 40-person stand-up, his weekly all-hands demos, trade-off sliders, and rules of engagement to navigate Atlassian's infrastructure change. Ritesh, Aaron, and Corinne continue to use the Health Monitor practice to keep an open dialogue among their distributed teams. For Ryan, the customer interview, stakeholder communication plan, and elevator pitch practices helped his teams get